Welcome everyone to three tools to build your organization's capacity to collaborate well. I am joined, I'm going to turn it over to you, maybe, Orpa. Do you want to walk us through the opening and some of the grounding pieces before we dig in?
Sounds good. Thank you, Sylvia. Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Three Tools to Build Your Organization's Capacity to Collaborate Well. I'm so excited for our conversation with Sylvia, Linda, and Liz here, and for you all to learn about this amazing resource. Before we begin, I want to ground us in acknowledgement and gratitude. We recognize that Turtle Island, or North America, has been home since time immemorial to the ancestors of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. We recognize that in this territory, Indigenous rights holders have endured historical oppression and continue to endure inequities that have largely resulted from the widespread failure of non-Indigenous treaty people to hold up their responsibilities. We also want to do an African ancestral acknowledgement alongside this gratitude. We acknowledge those who came here as settlers, as migrants either in this generation or in generations past, and those who came here involuntarily, particularly those brought to these lands because of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. We honor the legacy of African ancestors and thank them for their contributions towards ending poverty in all its forms. Black voices and Indigenous voices have long been at the forefront of movements that have shaped our communities, championing labor rights movements and pioneering the foundations for social welfare to ensure that all people receive vital supports. Their legacy and contributions continue to build a more caring and equitable society for all. And I hope that we can come away from this webinar with some tools to continue to advance that equity. Just a note on entering this space virtually. Tamarack learners, by participating here, you agree to center equity, inclusion, and a sense of connection across all people. Our priority and responsibility is to protect the safety and well-being of staff and members of our learning community. So by participating here, you agree to participate with openness and respect for all. A couple of tech considerations as well, since we're using the Zoom webinar format. Please keep, some of these don't apply, but since we're using the webinar format, audience, please feel free to engage in the chat as we hear from our presenters today. If you have any questions, please navigate to the Q&A panel. If you don't see it already at the bottom of your screen or in your Zoom functions, you should be able to find it under More. If you look at the circle with the ellipses, there's a Q&A panel there. So if you submit your questions through the Q&A panel, then other folks can like them and upvote them. And when we get to our Q&A portion, we can make sure to prioritize all of your wonderful questions. And again, please use the chat box to respond. We'd love to hear from where you're calling in from. And yes, I will turn it over now to Sylvia.
Thanks
Oh,
so much.
Sylvia, you're on mute.
It would
There we
be
go.
helpful if I took myself off mute, don't you think? Hey, folks, I would encourage you to also use our chat to take a few minutes, introduce yourself, and let us know the lands on which you are joining us from today. It is my pleasure, if I can get you to jump to the next slide, Orpa, to introduce myself and my colleagues. My name is Sylvia Chu. I'm the Consulting Director of Collaboration at Tamarack, and I have been a co-developer alongside Linda Mullenhauer and my colleague Liz Weaver in the development of the collaborative organization resources that we're thrilled to be talking about today. Linda is the chair of Ignite NPS. It's a foundation that's committed to igniting new ways of working in the nonprofit sector. And Linda brings not only more than 20 years of experience with a consulting practice working with funders and nonprofits, she has a real deep knowledge and wisdom about the importance of governance, nonprofit governance, and the roles of the board as well. And thrilled to welcome my Liz Weaver, my colleague and former co-CEO of Tamarack. As many of you know, Liz has also a deep history in collective leadership, in collaboration, in governance, and currently, Liz continues to work alongside us as an associate on many projects. Thrilled to have you both here. Now, let's go to the next slide and I can tell you a little bit about our time. So what we want to do next is give you a little bit of a snapshot. Thanks, big shout out to the 74 of you that completed the pre-webinar survey. So we're going to share some results with you and tell you a little bit more about who all registered to be here today. And then we're going to dig in to the content or a sliver of the content of the collaborative organization resource. Specifically, what we want to do is focus on three things. The first is fostering a culture of leadership and for successful collaboration. The second is to really take a look at assessing collaboration opportunities. And then we're going to spend a little bit of time focusing in on how you mitigate collaboration risk. And then we want to make sure that we leave time to hear your questions, thoughts, and insights as well. On to the next slide, Orpa. So we have, it should be 187 participants, my apologies, from 7 countries. And you can see there on the map the various countries along with the diverse range of sectors that you all are finding yourself working in today. On to the next. So, what did we learn? In terms of registrants, 4% of you are board members. 9% of you are CEOs or executive directors. 46% of you are staff members, and 22% of you designated yourself as other. And then this was the one that totally surprised us. We asked you, what's the current number of collaborations that you are currently involved in, you, your organization, and take a look. 25% of you are in 1 to 4, 36% of you are in 5 to 10 collaborations, and a total of 39% of you are in 11 or more collaborations. That was just such a surprise. So let's dig in. Well, but really good information for us as we dig in today. And then we asked you all to share in one word what you saw as your biggest collaboration challenge. And just so those of you not familiar with word clouds, the bigger the word, the more frequently it was cited by folks in their responses. So communication and capacity very, very high. The two highest for sure, with share a coordination, shared leadership, and funding being sort of next in line in terms of people's interest. All right, on to the next. So, the collaborative organization. This is a web page and set of resources that we have created. And we were motivated to do this together because while we had lots of tools and resources focused on how to do collaboration well, there weren't so many resources really geared to the people, the senior leaders, staff leaders, and boards of nonprofits. And what we wanted to do with this set of resources is to really support boards and staff leaders within organizations to create the conditions and to offer the appropriate oversight and strategy to guide the collaborations that your organization is choosing to become part of and what it takes to lay a foundation so that your organization can be a trusted and sought after collaborative partner. And when we were looking at the word collaboration, we chose to really take a broad view. So it can include things like coalitions, networks, partnerships, joint ventures, integration, can even include collective impact initiatives as well. So from very simple with just 2 or more organizations to much more complex long term. And really, for us, the important piece is that there is clarity and support at the highest leadership levels for each of the collaborative partners. Why are they at the table? And knowing that they have the support of their organizations to do this work and do it well. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see this is a snapshot again of the website, and we'll drop some of the links into the chat shortly for you. Um, but you'll see that we focus, there's a couple of resources really about how do you foster an organizational culture that enables collaboration. Then, again, a set of resources focused on how do you kind of create shared understanding across the leadership and board about why collaboration, what is the case for it, what does successful collaboration look like, and how you can sort of map out the ecosystem of organizations around you so that you too can proactively identify opportunities for future collaboration. The next column really focuses on, okay, so you're in a collaboration. What is the role of board and or senior leadership to really provide oversight and be doing the due diligence to ensure that the collaborations that they're part of are functioning well and that the organization's objectives are flourishing through this collaborative effort. And then finally, we focus on the support. So, what are the things that are needed, that what can boards and leaders do to ensure that they are leading the organization to successful collaboration, including samples of a board policy on collaboration, opportunities as we are going to explore more deeply to assess and mitigate risk. And then how do you make those decisions when you need to exit a collaboration? What does it mean to do that well and responsibly? Those are just a handful of sort of the different tools and resources that we're covering. If we can go to the next slide. I think this was my favorite part of creating this resource, to be honest. We had the privilege of actually engaging 10 different sector thought leaders from a range of different organizations, and they each explore with us and make the case for the benefits of why collaboration is no longer a nice to do, but in fact is increasingly becoming a strategic imperative. And just earlier this week, Linda sent along to me and flagged the something in the Ontario Nonprofit Network's 2025 survey of the sector, where they actually identified that the demands on the sector are growing at the same time. That the economy is putting extreme pressure on our nonprofits in terms of their ability to operate well. And in fact, this was the part that really surprised me. ONN was sort of predicting that collaboration is a viable strategic imperative because what they're predicting is that within the next 3 years, without some really good strategic thought and rethinking, a certain portion of the sector is at very high risk to no longer be here 3 years from now. So it really now illustrates concretely why and how collaboration can no longer simply be something that we consider as a nice to have or an add-on to our mission, but in fact is a pathway that we need to explore for how better or how else we might achieve our organizational mission and purpose and serve those that our organization supports. So if we go to the next slide, I'm going to turn it over to you, Linda. Can you tell
Great.
us
Thank you.
the leadership pieces?
Thank you. So the first set of resources and tools that we'll share with you help to foster an organizational culture and leadership competencies that promote successful collaboration. And I recognize, and as Sylvia has pointed out, that these are very challenging times with many organizations trying to keep their heads above water. It's in this kind of environment, it's easy to dismiss organizational culture as a soft idea that would be good to address, but not urgent. But culture and leadership competencies, which of course are very interconnected, have huge impact. They impact the choices that the board and the staff leadership make. They impact what's valued and what's not. and they impact how people work together. So here are 3 examples of culture at work. A strong group of board members or staff leadership are fixated on finances and the organization's survival, which doesn't leave a whole lot of room for conversations about collaboration. This is culture at work because it's shaped by the personal values and worldviews of the leadership. Are they highly risk averse, or are they innovators? Do they tend to be inwardly focused on the organization or comfortable with the complexity of the larger ecosystem? Here's another example of culture at work. We like to be a sought-after collaborative partner and always feel we're making a valuable contribution. This, too, is culture at work because it's about the principles that drive your relationship to community. For example, our reliability and trust more than just words on a value statement. And finally, last example, your staff or board members who are sitting at collaborative tables don't feel empowered to make collective decisions with their partners because they have to continuously check in. This is about culture too, because it speaks to whether the board and staff favor more hierarchical or more agile organizational structures and processes. Do they feel comfortable, more comfortable empowering or controlling? So culture and leadership have a big impact on whether organization is successful at collaboration. Now I'd like to give you a quick tour of what you'll find in the culture tools and resources. They describe 3 organizational values and mindsets that are critical for a culture that promotes collaboration. They describe what they look like in leadership practices and why they matter. The first value, if we could turn to the next slide, thank you. The first value and mindset is that the board and staff believe that the organization's purpose, its mission, and the intended outcomes should drive everything. So if we were to watch this in practice, leaders turn to the organization's purpose when making all critical decisions and choices. It's a constant North Star. Leaders also believe that the organization is an integral part of a larger ecosystem, which in practice means they acknowledge the organization as part of a larger web of activities that go beyond their own programs and services. It is not a hub around which everyone else works. So as a result, the board and staff leadership are committed to the health of the whole system, appreciating that when the organization makes a choice, runs a program, or takes action in their own sphere, it deeply affects others. Now, why does that matter to collaboration? These values mean that leaders look beyond their own walls to move the needle on their mission, to solve issues, to increase their capacity. This more expansive perspective makes it a lot easier to find common cause with other organizations. It's an abundance, not scarcity mindset, meaning they see other organizations as potential collaborators, not just competitors. All of this reduces power struggles and turf conflicts, which we know are inhibitors to successful collaborations. The second key values and mindsets of leaders of collaborative organizations are that they foster agility, adaptiveness, and innovation. Nimbleness is highly valued. So what does that look like in practice? Leaders can easily pivot. They're highly resilient when recovering from setbacks because they're able to hold on to the long game goals. As a result, they aren't wedded to things like assumptions, ways of working, or plans if they no longer make sense. These board members and staff leaders design processes and structures to be only as formal and centralized as necessary. to manage risk and be effective. They aren't cumbersome and rigid. For example, they like task forces, not just standing committees. As well, creativity and learning are highly valued. Board members and staff leaders are willing to try new things because it's okay to make mistakes and take measured risk. They know there's no quick fixes to complex issues. And it helps that the leaders can see the multidimensional picture, juggle options, and manage polarities. They're also comfortable with difficult conversations, lots of constructive debate, and the exchanges of ideas, particularly diverse ones. Okay, so that's what this second set of values looks like. Why do they matter to successful collaboration? They matter because collaboration is inherently risky and requires bold and courageous decision-making. And as I'm sure you know from experience, they rarely go in a straight line or follow a fixed plan. The leadership competencies I've described means there is the patience to navigate the dynamic and complex nature of collaborations. As well, these board members and staff leaders bring valuable skills to the collaborative table, like the ability to design versatile processes, lead without being controlling, and can untangle the inevitable messy problems. The third and final value and mindset that's critical for a collaborative organization is that leaders are committed to authentic relationships. Underscore authentic. First off, they believe in the value of equitable and inclusive environments. In practice, these organizational leaders are equitable and inclusive in both their words and actions. It's built into the very fabric of the organization. On a personal level, they are self-aware about their biases and privileges. They navigate differences with empathy and have the humility to know that they don't have all the answers. They truly believe that diverse perspectives and life experiences produce better decisions and solutions. They also believe in transparency, and their natural default is to share information openly, not contain it as a source of power. Secondly, leaders believe that it's essential to engage deeply with the community. This means that relationship building is seen as an investment, reaching beyond sort of comfortable inner circles to cultivate relationships with all of those who are impacted by the organization, continuously scanning for opportunities to work with others. These board and staff leaders earn the trust of others because they fulfill promises and they are intuitively open and honest communicators. These matter to successful collaboration because leaders have deep and accurate knowledge of the community, which enables them to more easily find the right collaborations with the right partners. They know it's better to have fewer high-quality collaborations than a lot of them. The organization is more likely to be invited to collaborate because it's seen as a credible partner. It's reliable, it's trustworthy. And the board and staff participating in collaborations can add real value at the collaborative table. For example, they can unlock power dynamics. They can harness the capacity of others and create a safe and welcoming environment, all of which are essential skills for successful collaboration. So that is a very quick run through in terms of what the key things to look for within your organizations, within your leadership, that are going to help you create better, stronger collaborations. If we could go to the next slide, I just briefly want to talk about what you can do to celebrate and reinforce all of this. One idea is for the board and staff leadership to have a short reflective conversation about how leadership's competencies link to successful collaboration, reinforcing why they're critical. You can develop a formal description of the principles that should drive your governance decisions, choices, relationships that include the values, mindsets, and attributes that I've shared. And you can build them into your board and staff leadership recruitment matrix and evaluation processes. Those are just three quick ways that you can celebrate and reinforce the culture and leadership competencies. So next slide, there are a number of tools and resources you're going to find in our website that are going to help you do it. The first is sort of a quick reflection you can do to do a check-in about whether the degree to which the culture is present in your organization. Then there's a larger resource that takes you through all of this in a lot of details. Another one is what describes in detail the competencies, the skills, the knowledge, the attributes that are going to help in terms of being successful in collaboration. And the last is how to build your organizational capacity for effective collaboration. So those are some of the tools that are going to take you much deeper into some of the things that I've just shared. So now I'm going to hand it over to Liz.
Thanks, Linda, and thanks, Sylvia, for setting us up. If we could go to the next slide. One of the things that I want to acknowledge is that lots of you have said, hey, we're involved in collaboration already, whether it's 1 to 4 or even more than 10. And so this tool isn't just for those or this web page or web resource isn't just for those that are starting collaborations. What we hoped in designing the tools and resources on this web page and the approach and the thinking behind successful collaborative journeys is that you can use them for new collaborations, but you can use them to assess and to really understand the collaborative opportunities that you're currently involved in and think about, are these opportunities that really align with the mission, vision, and values of your organization and are ones that will help the board and help the senior leaders, the CEO and the senior leaders of the organization really see that alignment and be able to use their resources, their human and financial resources in a way that helps not only achieve the goals and the vision, mission, and values of the organization, but also the goals and the vision of the collaborative entity as well. And so that's part of the design. So even though you're on this call and you're deeply engaged in collaborative efforts already, this website is for you as well. And there are lots of great tools and resources and ways of thinking that we hope will inform your thinking. I'm going to focus on assessing collaborative opportunities and then hand it over to Sylvia to provide one tool for mitigating risks. And this is one of the sections on the web pages. And the things that we've realized in our conversations about collaboration, and particularly from a senior leadership and board perspective, is that as we look across, collaborations that we've supported, and also, to some degree, some of the collaborations that we might have been involved in ourselves, is that sometimes we enter collaboration for the wrong reasons. Sometimes it's because someone invited us and we know them and we like them, and we'll, say, hey, yes, I'll join your collaborative table because I want to support you. that might be a good reason, but it might not be a reason that really thinks about that strategic alignment with the mission, vision, and values of your organization. And sometimes we're another example, and I found this prior to my joining Tamarack, I found myself to be engaged in this collaboration where a funder convened a collaboration. And I thought, oh, I want to be at that table because the funder is also at that table. And ultimately, it was a good reason to be there. But I didn't go into that thinking, is this a strategic table and will this help advance the organization that I was leading at the time as a CEO? So the idea is really to go into collaboratives or to assess your collaboratives in a mindful way, really looking at that elaboration or that alignment. The other scenario that we've seen often is that sometimes when a collaboration is going off track or is going in a direction that actually is challenging us and our organizations, we don't really know how to remove ourselves from that collaborative table. And so some of the resources on these web pages is an assessment tool and also some practical suggestions for you to think about how do we remove ourselves from collaborations that may no longer align with our strategic purpose as an organization or the values and goals. And we recognize that, organizations are dynamic as well. And so you'll go through strategic planning processes within your organization, and you might say, hey, these were our goals in the last strategic plan, but we've actually shifted some of our goals and priorities. And so you want to give yourselves an opportunity through this process to reflect on, should we still be at those collaborative tables, or do we enable the opportunity for other people and other organizations where there is more strategic alignment to be invited to those collaborative tables? And, the thing that we've realized at Tamarack, and Linda, I'm sure you would agree as well, is just as organizations are dynamic, collaborations are dynamic as well. And so it really means that both of us need to continually kind of reflect on, is this still achieving the outcomes that we hope it will achieve? And is the alignment in a purpose, is the alignment happening in a purposeful way that we meet both the goals of our organization, but also the goals of the collaborative? And then the final scenario that we identified was that in some cases, the organization might have said yes too many times without that kind of deep reflection, both from a board of directors perspective when they're setting strategic priorities for an organization, but also from a senior staff and staff perspective overall. So we find ourselves in too many collaborations, and we do what I like to call the collaborative dance, right? Where we go from meeting to meeting to meeting, and there's a bit of a shuffle in the community where the same partners are at those various meetings, or a mix of those partners are at those various meetings. And so it's I think then also an opportunity to reflect around those alignments. So one of the tools in this section is really a very strong assessment checklist. And the assessment checklist will take you through things like understanding what success looks like at different stages, thinking about the current collaboratives you're involved in, and also reflecting on potential future collaboratives or collaboratives that have approached you for your engagement and your leadership, and really kind of assessing, is this a good strategic choice for you? To what degree does the engagement of human resources, whether it's board resources, because sometimes you'll allocate a board member to sit at a collaborative table, or is it a good allocation of the human resources of your CEO or your senior staff members to be at these collaborative tables because the alignment is very strong? And then the assessment tool will also take you through thinking about, if it's not, how do you extract yourself? And what are some of the reasons that you might communicate to your partners, to the other partners around that collaborative table, what your role might be in the future, or how you're purposefully moving forward in this kind of alignment for your organization. And while we recognize that collaboration is an imperative for organizations in the current context that we find ourselves in, we also recognize that there has to be value add to the board, to the senior leadership, to the organization as a whole. So that's really some things for you to consider. And the assessment tool is a very helpful tool to guide your board, to guide your senior leadership, to guide the organization as a whole through that process. If we go to the next slide, a way of understanding this is a simple triangle. We like visuals as well as checklists. And so it's really looking at strategic alignment. It's looking at the confidence that you have, the board has, the staff have in the organization about the collaborative engagement opportunity and the confidence of that engagement opportunity in achieving its goals, and the confidence that you have in the alignment piece of it. And then really trying to understand, is this a good investment? Because we know that collaboration is not just about sitting at a table. It often is the investment of you as a human resource, but there's often also financial resources that might be required by the to support the collaboration to move forward. And those financial resources might be as simple as promoting the collaborative outcomes on your website. So, you might think, oh, that's pretty easy. But actually, it takes human resources to do that and financial resources. Or it might be that the collaboration is looking for in kind or direct financial resources. And so you want to look at it from an investment perspective as well. And so the Assess Your Collaborations tool or checklist is a really thorough approach to really considering all the elements, or as many of the elements as we could think about and in our research around collaborative processes. And we'd also, really invite you, if we've missed an element, to let us know that. So I'm going to turn it over to Sylvia to talk about mitigating some of the collaboration risks.
Thanks, Liz. I'm going to ask Orpa, would you mind? Yeah, there we go. One of the most important phrases that I first heard from you, Liz, was that collaboration happens at the speed of trust. So collaborative partners need to trust one another in order to be effective in their collaborations. And one of the most important ways to do that is to think about how you can go about establishing a memorandum of understanding. So, what it is not as formal as a legally binding contract, but more an opportunity for the various partners to clarify their understanding of roles, of the purpose behind their collaboration, and what their expectations are of one another. And as board and senior leaders of an organization participating in a collaboration, it's really important for you to see this as well, to see what the agreements are between the partners and to ensure that there's clarity, both in terms of your organization's role and commitment, but also what other organizations are being called on to do. A good MOU, because as you know, as the work gets going, sometimes it evolves. A good MOU, if you're evaluating it, is detailed and comprehensive enough that each of the partners really has a good understanding of their role and that of others. And at the same time, you don't want to have it so comprehensive and so detailed that it affects the nimbleness that Linda spoke to earlier. So you want it to be simple enough that it allows the collaboration to remain nimble and adaptive. So the checklist in this tool would include things like, does the MOU have a clearly state what the purpose and intent of this collaboration is? Does it outline and list the various partners who are part of the collaborative? You may want to think about putting a term on it. Not so much that this is when the collaboration itself will end, But just as a reminder that the MOU needs to be periodically reviewed by all partners and revised as the work may shift and evolve, and really keep it a living document. Does the MOU should map out the responsibilities of various partners, and this can include um, if there is one partner who has a sole responsibility to the collaborative, i.e., is the fiscal host of the dollars to support the collaborative work, then those specific responsibilities are clearly outlined. There may be also a set of shared responsibilities that every partner commits to make the collaboration function well. And also any disclaimers or limits to the agreements and responsibilities of any partners. Um, then the second critical component of a good MOU is outlining how the collaboration is led, how it's governed, and how decisions are made. So, what is the process that partners commit to reach decisions? And if a consensus cannot happen, what then, right? Um, it may also include very special high level decisions that may require approval from partner boards as well, if that feels appropriate. You should have mapped out some agreements around fundraising and financial management for the shared assets of the collaborative and how risk will be shared as well. Um, and then you want to make sure that there's something about should conflicts arise, how would they be managed, and any sort of parameters around how decisions are made about whether new partners are welcomed or partners are removed from a collaborative effort. Stuff around conflict of interest between an organizational partner and the collaborative, confidentiality, and what do we need to say about that? Something about how communications on behalf of the collaborative are managed, and something about how the work of the collaborative is planned, how it's evaluated, and how it's reported on. So that full cycle of accountabilities is also important. You'll see that in this resource as well, we have a few other tools that you can use to help clarify the agreements amongst partners in your own collaboratives, and in fact 3 sample MOUs as well, because sometimes it's useful to see language that others have used that might help you give language to the agreements between partners. So that's that tool in a nutshell, and really mitigates risk by clarity, right? Agreements in clarity before we find ourselves in a situation, a sticky situation that we may need to navigate. Um, I think this brings us to a close of the presentation piece around the tools, and I'm really keen to dive in and hear. Have we had any questions so far? And if there are new questions, I'd encourage folks to, again, keep plopping them into the Q&A box. But who are we hearing from?
Sylvia, so we have 2 questions or a question and comment in the Q&A chat right now. And like Sylvia said, folks, if other things have come up for you, please put them in the Q&A or in the chat. I'll check the chat as well. One question from David that's gotten a couple of thumbs up. How can we honor and sustain partners who sit at different levels without making them feel like lesser collaborators?
That.
Do you want to tackle that, Sylvia?
I think it's a very good question. Um, what comes to mind for me and what that is at the heart of the question, which I love, is acknowledging that not all partners will be able to necessarily contribute to the same level, but what they bring and contribute could be unique and essential to the work overall. So, acknowledging that as a principle at the outset might be something interesting to put in an MOU, for example, and make it explicit. And it reminds me as well that you're getting at what you're trying, a successful collaboration is one where there is shared ownership and shared leadership for the work. And by welcoming in and encouraging all partners to contribute in some way is how you foster that sense of shared ownership, shared leadership, and commitment to the collective work. So I think it's a great question. Anything either of you would add?
The only thing I might add is that sometimes we perceive that different partners will bring different things, right? And we haven't actually had a conversation around the collaborative table about that. So we might think, oh, we have a funder at the table, so they're going to bring funding. And we have government at the table, and they're going to bring, some other resources. And then we have the nonprofit sector, and we have voices of people with lived and learned experience. For example, that might be our collaborative table, and we'll make assumptions about what people can contribute. And I think an MOU is a really great tool for kind of clarifying what the collaborative as a whole needs to in order to do its work, right? In order to achieve that. And it might be that, when you have those conversations around the table, you can have, I know a tool that Sylvia, you like to use a lot is gives, gets, and constraints, right? What can I give? What do I need to get? And what are the constraints of me being involved in this work? And I think that that's a really helpful one. But I think we also have to have an open and honest conversation around a collaborative table about what we truly need in this collective work to achieve the collective purpose. And then that leads to a question within the organization, the board and the senior leadership of the organization. Do we have enough resources? That assessment part, do we have the right kind of combination of resources to be an effective collaborative partner? Um, so these things that question is important and connected to the assessment question and to the MOU.
And just to add to that, it's back to this culture issue, is in the same way an organization's culture can have an impact on success in finding and participating in the right collaborations at the collaborative table. A lot of people just dive in thinking we got to get going on our outcomes and so on, and they forget that those conversations about what culture are we trying to have, what principles will drive us, and including naming power dynamics from the very beginning.
Thank you all. I think this relates to, or we can build off of this, your answers onto another question that's related around ensuring that people with lived experience are equitably included and empowered in collaborative processes, ways to do that beyond providing honorarium. I think I love what you mentioned, Liz, about gives, gets, constraints, or looking at what strengths people bring in. But is there anything else that folks want to add around engaging people with lived experience?
I think it's again, you have to think about the collaborative purpose, right? And does that process enable the collaborative purpose? And so it ties back to that. If indeed it does, then you do want to think about as a collaborative what resources are required to make that equitable, make engagement equitable, and make some choices as a collaborative. And it might be that that has implications for organizations around the collaborative table to enable that, right? And how might those organizations enable that? And so again, it's tied to, like, that's why I think, Linda, your point earlier about culture assessment and mitigation, these things are not separate things, they're actually connected to one another. And as we were building this resource, we really tried to make intentional connections between each of the components of the resource of the collaborative nonprofit, because we really wanted to help you think about collaboration in a from a holistic perspective, not
Right.
just a say yes perspective, but really looking at the the opportunity, but also the implications of the opportunity on the organization.
And to that, I would add two other things around beyond providing honoraria. One is don't assume that, um, like, I think sometimes it's useful to gather a group of people with lived and living experience to share stories and identify common patterns and themes, which then, they can nominate spokespeople from their group to be part of the collaborative table. So you're not sort of setting an individual up to only speak from their lived experience, um, because sometimes those lived experiences are diverse as well. But you need to have confidence that you're well representing a constituency, not just yourself, the individual. And that's one way to support. So it's also the reminder that as a collaborative, it isn't enough to just name one or two delegates with lived and living experience. Continually engaging those perspectives throughout how the work is done is also important. And then there's the real basic, when are the meetings held? Right? If people with lived and living experience have jobs and other commitments, meeting in the evenings is often easier. Whereas for the organizational members, we often by default will schedule a meeting in the middle of the day. And that's another form of, making it harder to support full participation.
Thank you. I think we have time for one or two more questions. So if folks go into the Q&A panel and see something that really resonates with you, please do give it a thumbs up. We have a question from Maria. How can we transfer leadership as the collaboration grows? A strong organization may have started the project and there is a need to hand over the leadership to others. Any tips around that?
I think this ties into culture, Linda. I mean, around the collaboration, is that you build that in from the very beginning. You build in this kind of culture of co-design and co-development, right? Even if it is a strong organization, initially launching it, if you're joining a collaboration where that is the case, you maybe want to join and say, how do we move towards shared leadership? How do we move towards this culture of collaboration around this table? And that might be the value add that you and your organization brings to that. And that gets to that whole question between buy-in and ownership, that we tackle. And our intention is that those collaborative partners that are authentic and have the resources and authentically own the process will contribute effectively to the process. I don't know, Linda, if you want to
Well,
speak more
yeah,
to
two things I
culture.
would add to that. Your point about culture, Liz, at the table, and I've seen a lot of collaborations that look like a triangle with
Yeah.
up here versus a circle. And I think that's partly what you're getting at. Secondly, lots of organizations come in because it's like they're pulled into the stream because of a strong or articulate or passionate group of people. And that's where having organizations and focusing our attention on why the organization needs to think about why we focused on the organization, not the collaborative table, is if that is the case, then those organizations remain committed not to a person, but to what it is that the collaboration is trying to achieve, because they've done their full assessment. It lines up in all the things that Liz talked about and some of the things that Sylvia talked about. So I think that's where it isn't about the individuals sitting at the table. It's about a group of organizations coming together who then assign people.
And to build on that, like a really concrete example is when the organization's culture is committed to collaboration, then the designate or the delegate from the organization who sits at the collaborative table will always be, there'll be structures internal to the organization that allow the sharing and wisdom of the collaborative to be brought back into the leaders of the organization. And that continues to reinforce the organizational wide commitment to the collaborative. So sometimes, transferring leadership can be the representative from our organization is changing. The representative to the collaborative table is changing, but the organization's commitment remains strong because there's good two-way communication back and forth.
Right.
This is, I think we have time for one last question, and maybe one of you can take it, Sylvia, Linda, and Liz. But Lisa shares a question around documentation, and this makes me think of sharing like collaboration impact stories and things like that. But often trust is built by one or two members of the team, and especially early conversations and experiences are difficult to share at a team level. So any suggestions around that?
It's a great question.
Is this related to the lived experience, kind of?
No, I think
the dynamics
go ahead,
of
Sylvia.
the collaborative work, right?
I think I'm happy to respond. I think what's really helpful and a tool that we've used a lot is this kind of um, uh, a short report that the table develops a kind of key milestones that the table has identified as the decisions that they've made, some successes that they've had, who's around the table. That key milestone document is not only essential for the table, but it's an essential ingredient for the boards, for the delegate from that organization to take back to their boards and to inform their boards about what's happening around that collaborative table and how that organization might be contributing or not. So it doesn't have to be a thick document. Actually, the shorter the better, but it keeps everybody on the same page. And so communications tools like that are essential. Might be something you put in your memorandum of understanding, but you want to think about how are we communicating the essence of this collaboration back through our organization and back to our board, so our board can see how the collaborations that we're engaged in are aligning with our strategic plan. And I think, to tie this all up, that's kind of the essence of what we were thinking about when we began developing this resource, is to really think about how boards who are kind of the strategic partners of the organization can be engaged in the collaboration process and can really understand the importance of the role that the organization plays around collaboration tables, but also see how these collaborations contribute to the board and the organization's strategic imperatives. So that's kind of at the foundation of all of this.
Thank you, Liz. And Lisa, I know you mentioned you're asking about pre-MOU types of conversations, but I think the key milestones report can speak to tracking some of that as well. So we shared that. I'll share that link in the chat, and I'll just turn it over to you, Sylvia, to close us out.
I just want to say a great big thank you. Thank you, Linda and Liz and Orpa, for making this webinar happen. Thanks to all of you for coming and sharing such rich questions. And if more comes, if you use this resource and these tools, you get feedback, you have tips and ideas, or want us to come back and focus on one in particular, just let us know. We'd love to hear from you. So thanks, everyone. Have a fabulous afternoon.